Hello rail fans, Grandpa 1955 with you here this evening, and I wanted to share with you my love of transportation, and tonight we're going to be doing my TRAINZ simulator. That's TRAINZ, and I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos recently of people running mostly TRAINZ Simulator 2014, where they're running scenarios, and these guys look like they're having a blast doing that. And when I got my TRAINZ simulator a couple years ago, I got right into the building my own layout kind of thing. What I wanted to do was create a scale replica, more or less, of the track between Toledo, Ohio, up to about Detroit, Michigan, which is around where I live, and do it to scale. I had that actually built and everything looked fine, but then I realized, it just takes too long to run from Toledo to Detroit and do any switching and have it meaningful. So lately I've been scaling it back to 1/4 size and still working on that. So anyways, after watching these other guys doing TRAINZ Simulator 2014, I realized, hey, there's some routes and scenarios built into this game that I haven't really tried. So let me go back and do that. And I've done a couple of them, and let me tell you, it is a lot of fun, very interesting, really good simulator. There's certainly some major differences between TRAINZ Simulator 2014 and TRAINZ. Different graphics and whatnot, but the thing that really appealed to me about TRAINZ is the fact that you could build your own layouts pretty easily, put signals in, make them look pretty fabulous, but also have trains being operated by artificial intelligence running around the track that you build, interacting with your signals and your train that you're operating, as well as the scenery. In other words, if you had a train pulling a load of boxcars full of lumber, they could pull up to a lumber mill and they would unload there, and you'd see the car doors open. The lumber would then move from inside the boxcar to the lumber yard, and that could happen with logs or general goods or whatever it happens to be. So there was interactive scenery, which I really liked, and then you could actually set up rules that would tell the trains how to operate. They go into yards, drop off their load of railroad cars, pick up another set, go to the engine shed, refuel, do whatever you want them to do. And it was a really cool way of making basically an operating session that now you can interact driving your own train. So that's what I like about this. Graphics may not be as good on this one. Debatable, I guess it depends on your system and whatnot. But the other thing I like about this is that the users can actually build their own equipment. In other words, they can design their own cars, their own locomotives, and they're posting this stuff, and also scenery and other stuff, and they're posting this stuff by the thousands online, and then you can download it for free. Now, everybody I've seen doing these scenarios and the other TRAINZ simulator, they're paying fairly big bucks to get a couple scenarios, where this one has some built in, and then you can download other scenarios built by other TRAINZ enthusiasts for free. I thought that was really cool. So anyways, let's share some of the routes today, and let's go into the routes. We'll show you what's available. They've got Avery, Drexel, CN, Holly Subdivision, Conrail, Lincoln, CSX Saginaw, Detroit Connecting, Downtown Traction, ECML, Kings Cross, Harbor Master, Port Ogden, and Northern. And these are the major routes, and inside of them are different sessions. So let's do the CSX Saginaw Subdivision. We're going to go into sessions down here. And you can see that there's two basic sessions within that route. There's the nocturnal navigation and the strain of grain. And tonight we're going to be doing the strain of grain. So let's select that and get this thing rolling. And then I'll talk to you about some different things along the way. You can see that right off the bat it makes you select between the train control mode, and you can do it in the cab mode, which means you throw these levers just like in a real train. They operate the direction you're going, forward, neutral, reverse, how much power you're giving the engines, how much brake you're applying, and all that stuff. And you have to be pretty on top of your game to operate that. Or you can use the DCC mode, which is what I'm going to do. It's kind of like cheating. This is basically like the controls on your electric train set. You turn it one way and you go forward, you turn it the other way, you go backwards. But what we're going to do is this scenario, and what I've done was modify it simply to get this section right here, which in the standard game, they didn't have it in this particular scenario. What I like about this is it tells you what your next limit is, speed limit, and your next signal, what color it is, and the distance to each of those, how far you've gone, and the gradient that you're on, and stuff like that. And what I found with this one in particular, there's a lot of changes in the speed. You can be doing 40 miles an hour and then suddenly come up and unexpectedly see a 25 mile an hour speed limit, and you busted it because you didn't know it was coming by adding this, which is called a specialized HUD, and activating that for this scenario. Now you get more information and you're aware of things before they sneak up on you. So it says, good afternoon, we are called out on a southbound grain extra out of Flint, and that's Flint, Michigan, kind of close to where I live here. It's fully loaded and very heavy. Our power is only one SD40-2, which is going to be challenging. Our path is mostly downhill, so keep a close eye on your speed and keep control with all the grain car's weight pushing against the locomotive as you head south towards Toledo, Ohio. Traffic is fairly light this evening and should not slow us down. Note, you will need to manually throw the Grand Blanc switch to get the green signal when you are exiting the Flint region. Obey all speed limits and run through the portal south of Carlton to complete your shift. After the yard crew clears our track, we can depart. Let's go. So I'm going to kind of explain things as we go here. Let's take a look at our locomotive. This is the GM EMD SD40-2. What does that mean? General Motors built this thing. EMD is the Electromotive Division of General Motors, and they build trains. This is the SD40-2, and that is a locomotive General Motors built between the years of 1972 and 1989. They built just under 4,000 of these suckers, and it's 3,000 horsepower. Pretty incredible when you think about it. So how do you identify a SD40-2? Well, the 40 series had 3 of these little vents over the top of the engine, as opposed to the predecessor, the 38-2, that only had 2, and it also had a single large exhaust fan versus 2 smaller ones, and I'm not really sure where that is. If you look at the top, you can see 2 here, 3 here. I thought there was only supposed to be 1 there, but you know, I'm not a big, huge train fan, so yeah. I like trains, I love transportation, but I'm not absolutely certain. The SDs have 6 axles, so you'll see 3 wheels in the front, 3 wheels in the back, 6 axles. All those are powered by electrical motors. And inside here is that 3,000 horsepower, 16-cylinder diesel engine that turns a big generator and powers these wheels, and that's how they get the power to the road. So the 40 series has 3 of these vents. The SDs have 6 axles. The GPs, or general purpose, have only 2 axles in the front, 2 in the back, for a total of 4. And then the Dash 2 is different from the regular one. So this is an SD40-2 as opposed to an SD40. They have longer trucks because they put new motors on these suckers. And as a result, it has the same box, I think, as the regular 40, but then they have more room on the porch front and back to accommodate these longer trucks. So that's what makes the SD40-2 different from the SD40. And as you can see, we are pulling a whole bunch of covered hoppers full of grain. We're taking off from the Flint yard here. We'll be heading south as soon as this train up front clears our path. First off, I want to get rid of some of these things on the bottom here because we don't really need those. We're going to go inside the cab, take it off pause, and we'll see this train kind of clearing in front of us. So I'm a transportation freak. I love cars, I love planes, I love boats, ships, trains, motorcycles. If it moves, I love it, and I also love simulators. So if there's a simulator of something, there's a good chance I'm playing it. Right now I'm kind of concentrating on this one, which is the train simulator, but I love Flight Simulator, and I'll be posting some videos of that later. I love European Truck Simulator, so maybe I'll be posting some of those as well. So now that that train has cleared, you can see we've got a yellow signal here. So let's move ahead slowly. We'll basically move ahead by hitting the W key to move forward, the X key to move back. And you move out slowly, take up the slack in the couplers. If you just kind of gassed the engine and took off, you could literally pull the couplers out of the cars because of the sudden shock and force put on those couplers. So now that the slack is out of the train, and you got to remember we got a long train behind us, it takes a little while to get all that slack out, we can start giving it some gas. You don't want to give it too much because you can get some wheel slip. And we'll be talking about some differences as we go. We got a railroad crossing here, so let's blow our horn. And you can see our speed limit right now is 40 miles an hour on the top right of my screen. We've got a red over yellow signal, which means that it's proceed with caution, and that yellow appears to be flashing. I'm sure that means something to the chassis system. I am not a fanatic about trains at the point where I know everything that there is to know about trains. I really don't. And I'm learning as I go what the different signals mean and the horn signals and stuff like that. So I don't know it all. There's a lot of you out there that probably do, and you can post comments to correct me if I say something wrong. All I ask is that you do it nicely. I treat people with respect. I expect to be treated with respect myself, and I do not have all the answers. So you can see that we're coming up on a 25 mile an hour speed limit here, right around this corner. So let's get down to 25 miles an hour. You can see the speed limit right there on the right as we're going past it. The interesting thing about train speed limits, as soon as the nose of the train hits a slower speed limit, you have to be at that speed limit. However, if it's a faster speed limit, you have to wait for the end of the train to pass it before you're allowed to go faster. So you may, next signal is going to be the next limit you can see right up here is 30 miles an hour. And you'll see that go by. We cannot go 30 miles an hour until the end of the train is in that block. So, kind of unfair, but that's just the way it is. So things I like about this simulator, as I said, you get to build your own train simulator. You get to design how the layout works and put other trains on it, interactive. I think the graphics are probably not quite as good on this one than the Train Simulator 2014. But they're pretty decent. And again, I have a pretty average computer with a pretty average graphics card. I think it's pretty decent, and it certainly gets you out there and can operate the trains. And it's fairly realistic. So here's our 30 mile an hour speed limit change. You can see as we go past it, it doesn't change on the top right until the back of the train clears it. And you can see the next signal is yellow, which we just passed, and the next signal after that will be red. And that's why it's yellow. Yellow signal indicates that the following signal is going to be red. And you cannot pass a red signal. So we have to be prepared to stop. Once the back of the train passes that marker that we passed just a little while ago, and we can speed up to 30 miles an hour. You can see over there I-75 east and west, and that is probably true. I-75 is the major north-south interstate running through Michigan. Connects basically the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and goes all the way south to Florida. So 75 is correctly modeled there as we're running through the Saginaw, Flint area on our way south past Detroit. You can see our speed limit is now 30 miles an hour. And I'm not seeing, having gone through this scenario before, that it keeps track of your score, automatically shuts you down if you go through red signals and stuff like that. But you can see in about half a mile we're going to have to watch our speed because we're coming up on a red signal until we change that switch, and that'll give us the red the clearance. So I'm going to start slowing down. There's two ways to change switches. Oops. Let me just give a couple quick ones because I missed that orange signal. Anyways, a couple ways to change switches in this game. You can actually get out of the cab, go outside, and put your cursor over the switch and throw it manually. Or you can hit the J key or the Control J key. The J key switches the next switch in front of you, and Control switches the switch behind you. So I could go out right now and switch that switch and get the green signal, or I can just go slowly and wait for it to show up and hit the J key, which is what I'm planning on doing. So we're going to proceed with caution for the time being, going around this turn. Probably being a little overly cautious here. I can use the square bracket keys to move around on the inside. We can get a look at the cab control, which I think actually the graphics here look pretty good. Some of the graphics I think look kind of cartoonish. You know, this doesn't look like paint. This looks like somebody painted it. But you can see I can get to the other side of the cab. I can look out the window at McDonald's there. I can look behind us. But I know we're approaching under the road, so let's get on the horn here. About a tenth of a mile to go before we hit that red signal. Okay, I've thrown the switch hitting the J key, and now we've got a green light, so we can accelerate to 30 miles an hour. Let me get over on the correct side. And we'll look at some scenery as we go along. We'll try to do some outside views of the train as well. But this is a lot of sections where you got to pay attention to the cab signals, which is currently green. You got to watch the speed, which is coming up to 25 miles an hour. So let me slow down. So that when the nose of my train hits that 25 mile an hour mark, I got to be doing 25. And you can see it just switched to the top right. Once the speed goes up, the end of the train has to pass before I'm allowed to speed up. So now it looks like we're not doing much. So let's go outside and take a look at the train. We got the CSX 8376. And again, it looks kind of cartoonish. It's not the most accurate colors. It's not the most accurate representation of an engine. It's acceptable though. In other words, this doesn't look photorealistic, doesn't look like you can actually climb on the train and operate it. So graphics, I'd say, are fair. A little bit late on the horn there. I like the fact that the trees are moving. The only problem I have, it always looks like there's a hurricane blowing, so I think they're moving too much. But I'd say overall the graphics are pretty decent. We can pan out, you can see the limit of the tiles that kind of ends out there in the distance. And you can see we're moving this big old string of cars with one engine through the middle part of Michigan. Coming up on another, I'll zoom in here, coming up on another signal, so get on the horn. I wasn't paying attention to that 50 mile an hour limit, so I was a little bit late there. My fault. So we're doing 16 miles an hour. So a little bit more information on the SD40-2 that we're driving today. Maximum speed on this sucker is 65 miles an hour, and the engine itself, all by itself, weighs 368,000 pounds. That's pretty dang heavy. And when you think about what locomotives do and how much power they have and how much weight they can pull, that is pretty remarkable. So this thing's got a total of 6 wheels on the front, 6 wheels on the back, 12 powered wheels, pulling this huge train behind us that is massively heavy, and doing it with just this one engine. But again, it's 3,000 horsepower. It's just amazing the things that trains can do. Now, can you imagine being a locomotive engineer and having to go over all these crossings and blowing the horn constantly and worried about morons running in front of you? Probably gives them nightmares. So speed limit's still 15. We're doing 16 in a little under a mile. We can speed up to 30 as we go through town here. Let's check out the window. You see some smoke coming from the buildings over there. Again, the graphics aren't terrible. They're acceptable. They're probably not to the quality of that other game that I was talking about, but definitely makes it playable, and at least on my, I would say, mediocre to average computer, the frame rates are pretty good. Right now I'm getting about 60 frames per second. And I can live with that. I'll bet you with that other simulator, my system would be struggling to keep up with everything maxed out the way everything's maxed out on this one. So pluses and minuses to both. But again, I love simulators, and this gets me into the train game, so I like it. There's a thing called continuous traction effort on trains, and I think that's an amount of leverage they can pull on a train. I'm not really sure. You guys can post and let me know what that really means. For this particular engine, it's 83,100 pounds, and the fuel capacity, which is stored right here. The fuel capacity is, depending on the version of the train, I guess between 3,200 and 4,000 US gallons. Here we are coming up on another crossing. I was watching a TV show the other night, and it's called Trains and Locomotives, and it's a fantastic series. It was filmed by this guy out of Toledo, Ohio. I think he filmed mostly in the 1980s, 1990s, around that time frame, maybe up into the 2000s. They're not HD, but they are gorgeous in their cinematography, but it's all about trains, and I was watching them with interest because I'm into trains again now in the simulator. Watching how they blow their whistles and when they ring their bells and stuff like that, and a lot of different techniques. For doing it, and every engineer has their own little technique for how they blow the horn, especially back in the days of steam. I mean, that's where it was really an art form with how you did that. And you can see I got that one in pretty quickly, and some of the folks on TV did it that quickly. Some of them get it a nice long blast with a lot of time in between, different ways of blowing the horn and still be legal, I guess. The big thing is I'm trying to talk and learn the train stuff as we go along here, and sometimes I forget, oh yeah, I'm coming up on an intersection, I should be blowing the horn. So in a second here we're going to be able to speed up to 30. Some other interesting points. Of the 3,982 locomotives that General Motors built of this particular model, biggest customer was Burlington Northern. They ordered 835, and Union Pacific ordered 686. It seemed like they were second most ordered by any one particular company. So now our speed has gone up to 30. So let's give it a little gas. You can hear that 16-cylinder, 3,000 horsepower diesel spool up, providing more electricity to run the drive wheels. Again, I'm a little late on my horn signaling there. So we've got a green signal in about a mile. Slowing down to 20 miles an hour in another, well, just under a mile. I don't know how realistic this is. Now this is scaled down, I'm sure, because of the simulator. That seems like an awful lot of speed changes up and down over short periods of time. I would think if I was a trained driver, I would want to maintain my speed for as long as I could. Without having to do all the adjusting up and down. Oop, I missed that signal completely. My mind was elsewhere. Sorry if anybody got run over at that intersection, but those things do happen. Not on my watch. Let's look out the window here. So we're running through the eastern side of Michigan, which is where I live, which is why I wanted to do this scenario. And I must say that looking around as the scenery is rolling by, it looks pretty darn accurate. You know, the amount of trees, it's relatively flat. There's some rural areas, kind of like where we're at now, and then every now and then you run into some suburban areas. You'll see houses and industries and stuff like that. So I would say not a bad effort. I got to slow down to 20. And I need to be at 20 before I get to that spot. So it looks like I made it this time. Woohoo! Again, I'm getting about 60 frames per second right now. Graphics, like I said, not bad. I can live with it. Let's go look at the other side of the train. See what the view looks like over here. Pulling out the window. No kids playing out in the field. Must be a school day.